The wind that night was the kind that howled low, a moaning sound that curled under the eaves of the old ranch house like it was searching for a way in, rattling the loose boards of the barn and sweeping over the prairie grass in long, ghostly waves, carrying with it the smell of coming rain and something else, something metallic, sharp, and faintly wrong, like blood on old iron. Jacob Holloway, the rancher who'd worked these 300 acres his whole life, stood at the porch rail with his coffee cooling in his hand, staring into that black emptiness beyond the lantern light, listening, not just hearing but feeling something was out there, and it wasn't coyotes. The cattle had been restless all week, the horses refusing to go near the north pasture, and even his old shepherd, Duke, had taken to growling at the darkness with his hackles raised, which wasn't like him at all. Jacob had lived alone since Mary died 6 years back, alone except for the land, the animals, and the occasional visit from his niece Clara, who lived in town. But tonight he wasn't alone, not really, because for the past half hour, he'd been aware of a faint sound carried by the wind, a voice maybe, too soft to catch, but enough to make him set down his cup and reach for the Winchester leaning by the door. He told himself it was probably just some drifter looking for shelter, or a lost hunter, or maybe one of the Reynolds boys pulling another prank. But as he stepped down into the yard and the crunch of gravel under his boots sounded too loud in the night, the hair on the back of his neck stood straight. Duke followed, low to the ground, his ears twitching, until they reached the barn where the lantern swayed slightly from a beam, casting shadows that moved like living things, and that's when he heard it clear as day, a woman's voice, close now, whispering, "Please, take them off," soft, trembling, almost pleading. Jacob froze, not because of the words, but because they came from inside the locked tack room, the one only he had the key to, and he hadn't been in there since yesterday morning. He called out, his voice steady but low, asking who was there, and silence fell so sudden it made the wind seem deafening. He unlocked the door slowly, the hinges groaning, and the lantern light spilled over the room, and what he saw first was not the figure in the corner, but the boots, worn leather cowboy boots, covered in dust and streaked with something dark. Then his eyes lifted, and there she was, a woman in her mid-20s maybe, pale, hair matted with sweat, wrists bound with rope, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, her eyes wide and fixed on him like she wasn't sure if he was real. The smell hit him then, that same metallic scent, and his stomach tightened. He knelt beside her, knife in hand to cut the ropes, but she jerked back, whispering again, more desperate this time, "Please, take them off. Take the boots off, now." And Jacob, not understanding, asked why, but she only shook her head violently, tears in her eyes, so he reached down, untying the laces, pulling them free, and the moment the boots slid off her feet, something small and hard thudded to the wooden floor from inside the right boot. It rolled into the light, and Jacob's knees buckled as he realized what it was, a gold wedding band, bent and smeared with dried blood, the initials, M.H., faintly scratched on the inside, the same initials as his late wife, Mary Holloway. For a moment, the barn seemed to tilt, his breath gone, the woman whispering something about, "They made me keep them, they said you'd know, they said you'd come," but her voice faded as the darkness inside Jacob began to rise, not the kind you see, but the kind that swallows everything you thought you knew. He didn't notice Duke barking furiously now at the doorway, didn't notice the faint movement outside in the rain, didn't notice the faint sound of boots in the gravel moving away, because all he could think was that Mary had been buried with her ring, and someone had taken it. The woman clutched his sleeve, her nails digging in, whispering. For a few heartbeats Jacob could hear nothing but the sound of his own pulse thudding in his ears, that slow, deliberate whistle still weaving through the wind like it belonged to someone who wanted him to know they were close but not close enough to see. Duke's barking had turned into a deep, rumbling growl, and the woman, whose name Jacob still didn't know, had wrapped both her trembling hands around his forearm like she thought he might vanish if she let go. The darkness in the tack room wasn't just the absence of light, it felt heavier than it should, like the air itself had grown thicker, pressing against his skin, and Jacob's mind was already running ahead, replaying that wedding band clinking to the floor, the way Mary's name had been carved inside, and that single fact that made his stomach twist: he had buried her himself, 6 feet under on the hill behind the house, with that ring on her finger. His thumb found the hammer of the Winchester, pulling it back with a click that seemed too loud, and with his other hand he fished for the matches in his breast pocket, striking one against the wall and lighting the stub of a candle he kept on the shelf. The sudden glow threw their shadows against the boards, and Jacob saw the woman's face more clearly now, drawn, hollow-cheeked, with eyes that had seen too much. "Who gave you that ring?" he asked, voice low, but before she could answer, the whistle outside stopped, replaced by the crunch of boots in wet gravel, slow, measured, like whoever it was knew exactly how much each step would carry in the silence. Jacob blew out the candle instantly, motioning for her to stay quiet, and crept toward the door with Duke at his side, the dog's muscles tense as wire. The barn smelled of hay and rain and that faint coppery tang, and Jacob's senses were so sharp now that he could hear the drip of water from the eaves. A shadow passed in front of the lantern outside the barn, blocking the light for just a second, and then there was nothing. No steps, no breathing, nothing but the restless stir of the horses in their stalls. Jacob stepped into the yard, rifle ready, scanning the darkness, but the yard was empty. The gate to the north pasture stood open, swinging slightly in the wind, and that's when he saw it, a figure at the far edge of the light, tall, wearing a long oilskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat, standing perfectly still. "Who's there?" Jacob called, but the figure didn't move, didn't speak, just raised one arm slowly and pointed toward the house. A shiver crawled down Jacob's spine, and he turned back toward the barn to tell the woman to stay put, but she was already standing in the doorway, shaking her head, whispering, "You can't go back in there, it's not safe, they're inside." And when Jacob looked at the darkened windows of the house, he saw it too, a faint orange glow moving from room to room, like someone walking with a lantern. His grip tightened on the rifle, and he started forward, but the woman grabbed his sleeve, her voice rising in panic. "No, you don't understand, they're not after you, they're after what's under your floor." And Jacob stopped cold because there was only one thing under the floor of that old ranch house that anyone would care about, and it wasn't money. Back in 1889, when his great-grandfather built the place, he'd hidden something in a locked chest beneath the cellar, a chest Jacob had only ever seen once, when his father had shown him as a boy, and inside, wrapped in oilcloth, had been a stack of letters, a revolver with a pearl handle, and a ledger full of names and dates written in code. Jacob had never touched it since, and no one outside the family even knew it existed, or so he thought. The whistle started again, closer now, and this time there was more than one, two, three separate whistles, all in different pitches, answering each other like a signal. Duke barked sharply, and Jacob swung the rifle toward the open pasture, but the figure in the oilskin coat was gone. "If you stay here, you'll die," the woman said flatly, and there was no fear in her voice now, only certainty. Jacob wanted answers, wanted them right now, but there was no time, so he grabbed her by the arm, pulled her toward the house, and the two of them ran across the yard with the rain starting to fall in cold sheets. They reached the porch just as a sharp crack split the night and the railing splintered beside Jacob's head. Rifle fire. He pushed her inside, slammed the door, and slid the heavy iron bolt across, then moved to the window to scan the dark, but all he saw were shifting shapes between the trees. The woman was pacing now, wringing her hands, muttering to herself, and Jacob caught pieces. "Ledger, they think it's here, can't let them have it." And when he asked her how she knew about the ledger, she stopped, looked straight at him, and said, "Because my father died for it, and they gave me your wife's ring as proof they could get to you whenever they wanted." Jacob felt the bottom drop out of his chest, but before he could ask another question, something slammed against the side of the house hard enough to rattle the windows, and Duke growled, teeth bared. Jacob knew they had minutes at best before those whistles turned into boots on the porch, so he moved to the trapdoor in the pantry floor, lifted it, and told her to get down there. If they wanted what was in that chest, he'd give them something else instead. She hesitated, then nodded and climbed down into the dark, and Jacob pulled the door shut just as a voice called from outside, low and mocking, "Evening, Holloway, heard you got something that don't belong to you." Jacob didn't answer, just chambered around, every nerve in his body tight, the air in the room thick with the smell of rain and fear, and somewhere deep inside he knew that whatever these men were after, whatever his great-grandfather had locked away, was tied to Mary's ring and this stranger in his tack room, and that before the night was over, someone was going to die.